I still remember the sound of the rain on the driveway that night. Sharp. Relentless. Almost like applause. Except no one was clapping for me. I stood there, soaked, my father's words still ringing in my ears. Get out. Not a conversation. Not a fight. Just that, a verdict. A sentence. He threw my bag onto the front steps, then slammed the door behind me. Deadbolt clicked. Lights went off. Like I'd never existed. I didn't scream. I didn't knock again. I just stood there. Let the rain soak through my hoodie, let the cold tell me what I already knew. I wasn't welcome anymore. And Claire. She stood behind the curtain, watching. My stepmother. The ever-graceful parasite in silk robes. She didn't smirk. Didn't frown. Just stared. As if she'd finally won something she'd been working toward for years. And maybe she had. Before I share how everything changed in my life, feel free to comment where you're watching from, and unsubscribe if you've ever known the pain of family turning their back on you. My name is Aidan Everett. I was raised to be a Everett, which, in my father's world, meant obedient. Polished. Strategic. Powerful. He built Everett and Steele, the financial advisory firm that catered to tech millionaires and legacy wealth. I was supposed to inherit that throne, wear the tailored suits, say the right things, shake the right hands. But I didn't want it. Not like that. I'd spent for years trying to tell him, trying to build something of my own. I wanted to use data and behavioral psychology to help people, real people, manage their futures, not just preserve old money for the bored elite. He didn't understand that. Worse, he saw it as rebellion. You're wasting your talent, he said once. No, I told him. I'm just refusing to sell it. After that, Claire began her work. Whisper by whisper, inch by inch, she became his lens on me. It started with small things. She'd accidentally forward my personal emails to the office. Correct me at dinners, my tone, my posture, my lack of ambition. She started calling me the dreamer, a condescending nickname she'd say with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. But the real shift happened after Mom died. My father, already cold in his affections, became ice. Claire took over every inch of the house, redecorated everything. My mother's art. Donated. Her clothes. Gone. Even her garden, replaced with artificial turf because it was easier to maintain. I should have left sooner. But something about family, it keeps you tethered, even when the rope cuts your skin. The night he kicked me out, it was raining harder than I'd ever seen. Thunder cracked right as he said it, like nature had been waiting for the cue. You want to play poor? Go do it somewhere else, he said, red-faced, vein in his neck twitching. As long as you live in my house, under my roof, you follow my rules. And you're not willing to be part of this family business? Then you're not part of this family. He didn't even flinch when he said it. I didn't cry. Not in front of him. But later, in my car, parked in some rundown gas station lot outside Miami. I did. Hard. Not just for the betrayal. Not just for the sudden void. But because I realized. I'd been holding on to a version of him that never existed. I spent the night in that car. Phone on 3%. No money in my checking account, Claire made sure of that. My access to family funds had been restricted pending re-evaluation. They'd cut me off. Every safety net. Gone. I opened my mother's old notebook, the one she used to write in during her last days. Inside was a quote she loved from Anais Nin. The day came when the risk to remain tight in a bud was more painful than the risk it took to blossom. I didn't sleep that night. Just stared at that page. Somewhere between that sentence and sunrise, something inside me changed. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to fight for scraps at his table anymore. I was going to build a new table. And when the time was right, I'd make sure he'd never sit at it again. Funny how quickly life can shift. At 7 a.m. the next morning, I got a call from a law firm in Coral Gables. Private number. I almost didn't answer. But something in me said pick up. Mr. Everett, their voice said, calm, professional. You've been named as the sole beneficiary of the Lennox estate. I blinked. I think you have the wrong person. No, sir. This is in regard to a trust established by a Mr. Miles Lennox. I didn't know a Miles Lennox. At least, not directly. He was my mother's uncle, a quiet, eccentric man I'd only heard stories about. He was black sheep royalty in her family. Moved to California in the 80s. Made a fortune in clean energy, then disappeared into luxury obscurity. Turns out, he'd been watching. Reading. Listening. And he'd left everything to me. I arrived in Palm Beach later that afternoon. Still in the same hoodie and jeans. Still smelling like rain and road sweat. But the gate opened like I belonged. A black SUV took me down a driveway lined with royal palms, past marble fountains and manicured hedges that looked like something out of a movie. The villa wasn't a house. It was an empire. $45 million worth of oceanfront brilliance. Spanish tiles. Curved balconies. Floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the Atlantic like it owed us something. This is mine. I asked the lawyer again. He smiled. Fully. Free and clear. Mr. Lennox was quite specific. He wanted the estate to go to someone who wouldn't waste it. I wandered through their halls in awe. Paintings. Libraries. Technology. Staff quarters. Indoor gardens. Hidden doors. And in one room, a study overlooking the sea, was a note in Lennox's own handwriting. Aidan, I watched them try to snuff out your fire. Let this be your matchstick. Build. Own. Become. The world needs more like you, and less like them. That was the day everything changed. But I didn't call my father. Didn't text Claire. Didn't post about it. I wanted silence. I wanted them to sit in their version of reality for a little longer, believing they'd won. That they'd finally stamped out the rebel son. Let them believe. Let them keep playing house in their lifeless mansion filled with curated lies and decaying legacies. Meanwhile, I got to work. I brought in architects. Brand consultants. Psychologists. I built the Everett Initiative, but not under the family name. I renamed it Stonewake, something untraceable, something elemental. A consulting firm that worked with behavioral economics to help working-class families make smarter, long-term financial decisions. The same principles my father sold to millionaires? I gave them to people who actually needed them. For free. 3 months in, we had funding. 5 months in, we had case studies and press coverage. By month 7, his clients were calling my firm. Not because I took them, but because Claire had turned Everett and Steele into a public relations mess. Layoffs. Lawsuits. A toxic culture exposed by a whistleblower, one of my old mentors, in fact. I never asked her to do it. She did it because she said. Your father forgot people, Aidan. You didn't. Then came the inevitable. An email. From my father. Just one line. Where are you? I didn't reply. A week later, he sent another. Can we talk? I smiled. Closed my laptop. Then walked out to the terrace of my villa. And watched the sun set over my ocean. He screamed, "Get out," thinking he was ending me. All he did was free me. The deepest revenge is the one whispered, not shouted. The silence after the storm is never peaceful. It hums like a warning. I remember the cold sting of the motel air conditioning on my face, the damp pillow clinging to dry tears I hadn't meant to shed. My suitcase lay by the foot of the bed, half-zipped, half-forgotten, as if my life had already moved on without me. I didn't cry that night because I was weak. I cried because I knew I'd never return to being the same son again. The morning after Dad screamed, "Get out," I walked through the private gate of a California mansion no one in my family knew existed, a $52 million estate overlooking the Gulf. It wasn't a gift. It was a fortress. A place I inherited through a will nobody read, from a great-uncle my father once called, the odd recluse with too many hobbies. Funny how fortunes change when passed into quieter hands. The estate was vast but silent. Marble floors echoed footsteps. Artifacts lined their halls, not for decoration, but meaning. My mother's last photo sat framed by the fireplace. I hadn't placed it there. He had. Uncle Miles. He never married, never had kids, never entertained the press. But he'd been watching. And he left me everything. Not just their house. Not just the land. He left infrastructure. Offshore accounts. Shell corporations. A team of advisors loyal to the bloodline, not the drama. And so began the first quiet phase of my revenge. I called it Stonewake, a consultancy with no office sign, no website, no board of loud-talking men. A ghost ship of brilliant minds, ex-bankers, digital analysts, political fixers. Within 6 months, we managed $100 million in client assets, invisibly. Efficiently. Not a single tweet, press release, or gala announcement. I operated from the estate's converted guest house. Worked at dawn. Ran 10 kilometers before breakfast. Kept my phone on silent. Because revenge, the real kind, isn't a campaign. It's erosion. Quiet, steady erosion. Back in Dallas, Dad was remodeling the house, the same one my mother built. Claire had stripped it of every soft memory. New carpets. Cold colors. My childhood books sold in a garage sale. She posted photos online. Matching robes. New furniture. Her grown children posing in what used to be my room. They believed I had nowhere to go. I let them. What Claire didn't know, couldn't know, was that every financial move they made passed through the hands of a consulting firm she didn't know I owned. The one she unknowingly emailed about refinancing options. I reviewed her loan proposals while sipping coffee on the villa balcony. She had no idea she was begging for approval from the son she discarded. Matthew, my half-brother, eventually called. "Dad's been asking about you," he said. "Let him ask. He says things got out of hand." No. He got her out of hand. And let her take the wheel. She's cutting him off from old friends. Selling assets. Then let him feel what it's like to be invisible. Stonewake began buying properties within a 3-mile radius of Dad's neighborhood. Not homes. Influence points. A cafe Claire loved, acquired through a third party. She walked in one morning to find her favorite corner table gone. Replaced by new policies. Her name no longer carried favor. Then a boutique she supported closed overnight, its new owner uninterested in keeping dated clientele. Every comfort she touched began to evaporate, subtly, but surely. I didn't want headlines. I didn't want apologies. I wanted silence. That heavy, unsettling quiet that creeps into people when they realize their grip is slipping, but they can't see who's loosening it. By month 7, I had acquired full controlling interest in the family trust Claire once lobbied to oversee. She didn't notice, until she tried to authorize a wire transfer and was denied. "I'm his wife," she snapped to the financial firm's advisor. "I understand," they said. "But dual signatures are now required on all disbursements." Since when? Since authorization was updated, by Mr. Aidan. She hung up without a word. I still remember the exact timestamp of that call. But this wasn't about money. It was about removal. Removing her grip. Her smirk. Her presence from the spaces that used to belong to my mother, and me. I funded a scholarship in my mother's name at the university Claire claimed her niece would attend. I hired her niece's competitor. I sponsored the nonprofit that shut down one of Claire's board seats due to ethical violations. Each piece moved slowly. No press. No confrontation. Just silence. I was becoming someone else, not out of anger, but necessity. Miles had once written in a journal I found in the study. They think stillness is weakness. But still waters carve the deepest canyons. I took that to heart. One night, I walked into the estate's west wing, a room I had left untouched since moving in. Inside were boxes of old papers, sketches, and drafts of a business idea Miles never executed. A mentorship fund. Built for people who had been erased. I renamed it the Meredith Initiative, in my mother's honor. It would launch publicly in 6 weeks. And when it did, every institution Dad and Claire had tried to squeeze me out of, would come knocking. They won't recognize the man I've become. The one who eats dinner alone not because he's unloved, but because he no longer shares tables with people who serve betrayal. They will hear my name again. Not in a will. Not in an apology. But in a legacy they can no longer reach. The invitation wasn't gold-foiled or scented with expensive cologne. It was a single black envelope. No name, no logo. Just a date, a time, and a location printed in silver. Meredith Initiative launch. 7 p.m. Los Angeles Convention Center, Los Angeles. Dad and Claire received theirs the same way every donor did, through Stonewake's silent partners. Clean. Professional. Untraceable. They had no idea who was behind it. But I knew they'd come. Claire loved being photographed in rooms with money. Dad hated feeling excluded from elite circles. So they said yes. And just like that, they walked into their web, eyes forward, blind to the spider. It was a warm California evening, the kind that hugs your skin without apology. Guests buzzed beneath chandeliers, classical music played softly from the mezzanine as guests held warm cups of freshly brewed coffee. But there was no cold drink, just quiet focus, served one cup at a time. No tastings. No reminders of their world. I made sure of it. This night belonged to something different. To rebirth. To return. I stood in the wings as the crowd applauded a short documentary that told the story of the Meredith Initiative, an education and mentorship fund for those displaced from generational wealth and erased by toxic family dynamics. It was honest. It was raw. It was my story, just, not with my name. Yet. The narrator's voice faded. Lights dimmed. The spotlight drifted slowly center stage. Then my name was spoken aloud. For the first time in years, Aidan returned to the world that exiled him. And silence fell like thunder. I stepped onto the stage in a black suit tailored to precision. No tie. Calm face. Eyes forward. I didn't smile. I didn't need to. I want to tell you a story, I began. Not about betrayal. Not about money. But about inheritance, the kind that has nothing to do with assets. Claire froze. Dad's mouth parted. People turned to glance at them, piecing it together like a slow, tragic painting. Inheritance, I continued, can be pain. It can be silence. It can be watching the people you trusted rewrite your name off a page and call it progress. I told them about the boy who was kicked out for being inconvenient. About the son erased by a new wife with a sharper smile and colder hands. About sleeping in motels while the people who claimed to love you toast to their renovations. I didn't mention names. I didn't have to. Truth carries its own fingerprints. Tonight, I said, we open doors for those who've been locked out of their legacies. We don't knock. We build new homes, and fill them with names no one can erase. Applause followed. Not polite. Not curious. It was electric. A tide turning. Dad stood at the back, face pale. He looked older than I remembered, smaller. For a moment, I almost felt pity. Almost. But then I saw Claire clutching his arm, whispering poison like she always had, and that old coldness wrapped itself around me again. After the speech, I disappeared into the private lounge reserved for donors and speakers. Velvet rope. Security. One entrance. I sat in a leather chair by the fire, pouring tea into a matte black cup. And waited. The knock came 20 minutes later. Mr. Everett, the hostess said. Your father, and Mrs. Everett, are requesting a word. I didn't answer right away. Then. Let them in. They entered like strangers who once owned the place. Oh God, Aidan, Dad muttered. This is what you've been doing. Claire stared at me with those hawk eyes, always scanning, always calculating. This is revenge, she scoffed. Really? I looked at her, unblinking. No. This is restoration. The revenge already happened. She laughed, bitter. What, you made our lives slightly harder. Pulled some strings to shut down boutiques. That's your idea of vengeance. I leaned forward, voice low. I made you irrelevant. She flinched, ever so slightly. Dad finally spoke. You know I didn't want it to happen like that. You let it happen. I didn't know she. Don't, I said sharply. Don't pretend you were blind. You locked me out of my own mother's house. You called it discipline. But it was cowardice. He looked away. And in that instant, I realized the worst thing I could do wasn't rage. It was walk away. You're not part of this anymore, I said. You never will be. Claire crossed her arms. You think a few scholarships make you powerful? I smiled, the first real smile in months. No. But they make me undeniable. She lunged forward, furious. We're still family. No, I replied, standing up. We were a family until you made it transactional. And now the transaction is over. I handed her a letter, notarized, final. A legal severance of all financial ties. No claim to Meredith Initiative. No inheritance. No stake. No share. I bought out the trust, I said. Fully. With interest. Her jaw dropped. You can't do that. I already did. The board ratified it last week. Your name doesn't exist in our systems anymore. I turned to Dad. I'm not asking for closure. I came to show you what silence builds when you feed it enough pain. They left without a word. And for the first time, I was the one walking them out. The next morning, headlines broke. Anonymous benefactor launches $120 million legacy program to empower the disinherited. Former heir rebuilds fortune after family betrayal. My name was in none of them. Because I didn't need it to be. People would whisper. Guess. Connect the dots. They always do. But by then, the legacy was sealed. Not in loud revenge. Not in lawsuits. But in quiet reclamation. I sat by the ocean that evening, watching the tide drag away footprints from the sand. Some memories don't deserve monuments. They deserve to be washed clean. Have you ever found peace where you once felt broken? I'd love to hear your story in the comments. And if my journey meant something to you, please like and subscribe. Your support helps me keep sharing these stories of strength and healing. Thank you for being here.